Hey guys, what's going on? It's me, Jay. Another review, the fourth installment of my Star Wars series, in which I chronicle each and review each and every Star Wars film and piece of physical media. Well, now we arrive in the year 1999. The 20th century is almost out, and the 21st century is on the horizon. And Star Wars is already a part of the zeitgeist. It's already a part of the culture. The three movies, Star Wars A New Hope, the original Star Wars Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi are ubiquitous. They're everywhere. People love them. They're a cherished part of cinematic history. But George Lucas, in 1994, he becomes restless. His children have never seen the original trilogy in theaters, like most children of my generation. Me and his kids are probably around the same age, so he wants them to have the experience of seeing Star Wars on the big screen. So rather than write new stories that involve Luke and Leia and Han Solo, he decides, I'm going to go back a ways and tell this story, tell the origin story of Anakin Skywalker, how Anakin Skywalker turned into Darth Vader. Darth Vader. What made this promising Jedi, the most promising Jedi in the history of the galaxy, what made him turn evil? What were his motivations? So in 1994, George Lucas sets out to write this story. Now he already has bits and pieces of it from the original treatment back in the 70s, but he has to flesh it out, just like he had to flesh out the original. So it begins in 1994. And to get people ready for the release of The Phantom Menace, he re-releases the original trilogies in 1997. First with A New Hope, then with Empire Strikes Back, and then finally with Return of the Jedi. And by this time, Darth Vader is already one of the most popular Star Wars characters, so telling his origin story kind of makes sense. So, in the part of 1999, the trailer is released. It is the movie Meet Joe Black by starring Brad Pitt is the movie that the first Phantom Menace trailer appears in as a preview in this film. Okay, so what's the story? We start off with the Trade Federation. Who's the Trade Federation? They are this group, this cabal, this organization, this corporation, kind of like the corporations in our real life world. We have corporations in the Star Wars galaxy, and they have blockaded this this planet of Naboo. They blockaded all trade with Naboo. This is very similar to something that happened in the real world during World War I, where Belgium was neutral. Belgium was not in the war, and Germany blockaded them and ultimately invaded them, prompting other allies to react. So Naboo is basically Belgium in this scenario. they've been blockaded, and they're basically going to be invaded by this trade federation, because this trade federation has immense political power in the republic that you would not believe. Now, the galaxy is under the republican system. Each planet is represented in the galactic senate. This is prior to the empire, of course. So it's basically a democratic Republican system, similar to what we have in the United States. So, of course, being that an ally is blockaded and basically the Trade Federation is trying to starve them out, of course, this is going to prompt the Senate, the Galactic Senate, to react. So, Chancellor Valorum, who's basically the head of state in the galaxy, sends out an envoy of Jedi's. Now, what are Jedi's? Jedi's are mentioned in passing in the original trilogy, but here in this universe, in this set of movies, we get to finally see the Jedi as they were. It was only their existence and their golden age was only alluded to by the likes of Yoda and the likes of Obi-Wan, but now we get to see them. We get to see them in action. We get to see the Jedi Council. We get to see how they function, what they were like. They're basically peacekeepers. They are not uh, warriors. They fight if necessary, but really they're peacekeepers. They're employed by the Republic because the Republic does not have a standing army. They try to keep the peace, between each and every planet by negotiation, similar to the Federation in Star Trek, right? Which, of course, George Lucas took a lot of inspiration from Gene Roddenberry, the creator of Star Trek, even though Star Wars fans don't really like to admit that is the truth. And it's basically a peaceful world. It would be like our world if the UN actually functioned. So Chancellor Valorum sends these Jedi out, and the two Jedi are Qui-Gon Jinn, played by Liam Neeson of Taken fame, and Ewan McGregor, who is a student of Qui-Gon Jinn, the young Obi-Wan Kenobi. Now, the negotiations basically break down because the person instituting this blockade of Naboo behind the scenes is a shadowy figure that appears in a robe and a black robe through a hologram speaking to the Nemoidians, the representatives of the Trade Federation. We know him as the Emperor because we've seen him previously in the other films, but it's taken for granted that the audience does not know who this person is. He's basically telling them to kill or attempt to kill with the droid army and attack the Jedi, which is what they do. They send the droid army out to attack the Jedi. Of course, they're scared, but he's not scared because he has the Force on his side. This person. And what this is an attempt to do is to undermine Chancellor Valorum, because it's now going to make Chancellor Valorum seem like he is weak. He is not effective enough to keep the peace, because here they come on a peace mission and they're already attacked. Now, they cut through the droid army like butter. This droid army is one of the weakest droid armies that I've ever seen, honestly. Both Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon are able to cut through them immediately. But they realize that they must get to Naboo because they know now that it's not just a blockade, that eventually Naboo will be invaded. So they must get to Naboo. So they take a shortcut through the water world, the Gungan world. Naboo is basically the surface planet, and the Gungan world is the underwater planet. And here we see this underwater world that is very very elaborate, and then we see George Lucas's CGI, at play here. Beautiful scene of them swimming through uh, the Gungan world where they go, and there they meet a Gungan outcast, Jar Jar Binks, played by Ahmed Best, but basically one of the first all CGI characters. Now, all the characters in Star Wars, this version of Star Wars: The Phantom Menace, are CGI. Even Yoda. I have my Yoda cup right here. Yoda cup. See, may the Force be with you. Has my name on it. Yoda too is CGI in this film. He doesn't really factor in all that much in the beginning. But going back to them meeting this outcast, this Gungan outcast, with whom Qui-Gon Jinn saves his life. So basically, because Qui-Gon's life was saved by this Gungan, he owes him a life debt. He owes him a favor. So they go to Boss Nass, who is the ruler of the Gungan world, basically beseeching him, listen, you have to join forces with the people of Naboo, because if the world of Naboo goes down, you will also go down. It's a symbiotic relationship, you and the people of Naboo, the upper world and the underworld. He will have none of it, and plus he doesn't want to deal with Jar Jar Binks, because for some reason they don't really go into. Jar Jar Binks is outcast from the Gungan world, so the Jedi's agree to take Jar Jar with them because of the life debt that Qui-Gon owes to Jar Jar for saving his life. So they get to Naboo. They basically warn the Queen, Queen Amidala, of the impending invasion. While they're there, they are again attacked, and this time they have to go to Coruscant, which is the city planet, which is the capital of the Republic. And when they on their way there, their ship breaks down, and when the ship breaks down, they need parts to fix it. But where are they trekked off to? They're trekked off to Tatooine. Now, we talked about Tatooine in the last video. It is basically a desert planet. It is run by the Hutts. At this time, there's nothing really there. It's not under the Republic's jurisdiction. It's kind of like, picture the United States during the antebellum period, right? The 1800s. There were territories in the United States like Utah, territories like California, for example, that were under the jurisdiction of the United States, but really weren't covered by the United States. They were like outlaw areas. That's how Tatooine is. So when they get there, not only are Republic credits, which is the money that they deal in, not good enough, and the junk dealer Watto won't take it in exchange for the extra parts they need to fix their ship, but also there's slavery there. Slavery has been outlawed by the Republic, but here there is slavery. And Watto, the junk owner, is a slave owner, and two of his slaves that he owns is a young boy, 8 years old, named Anakin Skywalker, and his mother, Shmi. And he's a technological wizard. He can build pods on his own. He can build droids. In fact, he's in the process of building a protocol droid, C-3PO, to help his mother around the house. So we're introduced to him, and he interacts with the young maiden, because the Queen Amidala of Naboo, she wants to go to the capital with them to speak to the Senate, to see what these Jedi are up to, and also, what are they going to say to the Senate on behalf of the people of Naboo. So she sends her envoy, which is her handmaiden Sabine, right? So the boy interacts with the handmaiden. They become friends, and he admires her beauty. He says, "Are you an angel?" And she asks, "Are you a slave?" And he says, not. I'm a person, and my name is I'm a person, and my name is Anakin." And she says, "Forgive me. Um, this is a very strange place to me. I don't really know much about this place. I'm just inquiring myself." Now, while they're there on Tatooine, one of the funniest scenes happens where Jar Jar Binks, he's a klutz. He trips over himself. He does silly things. One scene, he electrocutes himself during the preparation for the pod race, which I'll get to. Here he steps in bantha shit. And Qui-Gon is trying to, keep track of him because he'll go off the beaten path and he'll do whatever, right? So since Watto doesn't accept Republic credits now, uh, Qui-Gon tries to use the Jedi mind trick on him, which is basically when the Jedi waves his hand through the power of the Force, the person is convinced to accept your premise or your arguments. Obi-Wan does this in the first movie when the stormtroopers are looking for uh, the two droids R2D2 and C3PO, and he goes, these aren't the droids you're looking for." Qui-Gon tries to do this to Watto. Watto's not having it. He says, I'm a Tragdarian. Jedi mind tricks don't work on me. They only work on the weak." So basically, they go back to the slave quarters with Shmi and Anakin. Anakin's talking to Qui-Gon. He's telling him about he wishes that he could change the world. If he could, he would come back and he would free all the slaves and he would try to make the world a better place. He basically has a caring heart, a very loving heart, a very generous heart, and he's a genius with technology. And he loves to pod race. And sometimes Watto puts him in these pod races so he could win him money. So Qui-Gon comes up with the idea, why don't we have the boy race pods, and if Anakin wins, Watto has to not only fix the ship, but also has to free. Initially, Qui-Gon tries to get the freedom for both Anakin and his mother, but he can only really negotiate for one, so he negotiates for Anakin's freedom. And him and Watto roll on it, and if Watto wins, Qui-Gon gets the mother, and if Qui-Gon wins, he gets Anakin, and Qui-Gon manipulates the dice. So therefore, if Anakin wins the pod race, he'll be free. But the only thing he's done pod races before, but he's never finished a pod race. So they're really concerned. But he does the pod race and he does win. And the pod race scene is probably one of the best scenes. He races against one of the best pod racers in Sebulba. It's probably one of the most memorable scenes of episode 1. So now Anakin is free. But this means that he has to leave Tatooine. And he has to leave his uncompleted droid in C3PO, and also he has to leave his mother. But the mother is happy that he's going to be with the Jedi, he's going to become a Jedi, and he's going to have a better life. But he's sad because his mother is the only parent that he's ever known. Because Qui-Gon senses in him a special connection with the Force, a very strong Force connection. And he asks his mother, he says, who's the father? And the mother says that he was conceived just by the power of the Force. There was no father. She just got pregnant randomly, and there he was. So Qui-Gon senses that he may be the chosen one. There is a prophecy in the Jedi religion that a chosen one would come that would bring balance to the Force. Between uh, in the war between the dark side and the light that is perpetual, Anakin could be the one. So he does a blood test on him because they're testing for midichlorians. One of the ways they determine an individual that is force sensitive throughout the galaxy is by doing this blood test. But if you have a high count of midichlorians, you are force sensitive because the midichlorians tap into, you're able to manipulate the midichlorians and in your ability to use the force. Previously in other movies, the good morning, Lise. Previously in other movies, see, I got the cup, Lise. This cup, this Star Wars cup, Lisa gave to me a couple of years ago. But these special cells, they allow you to use the force. So if you have these cells in abundance, these midichlorians, um, the more of them you have, the stronger a force user you will be. So Qui-Gon does the test, and he finds out that Anakin has a higher midichlorian count than even Yoda, who is at that time the greatest uh, Jedi there is. So he's convinced that Anakin is the chosen one. So the very sad scene where Anakin has to leave his mother in slavery, he tells her that when he becomes a Jedi and he trains in the Force, he will come back to Tatooine. He will. David says he watched this a lot, and he will free his mother from slavery. So they go to the Capitol. The Senate has their talks about what is going on with Naboo, and the senator from Naboo declares that he is running for chancellor because the Republic has declared that they don't have faith in Chancellor Valorum. Basically, Chancellor Valorum is weak. You know what I mean? He's being impeached, what we would call in our modern political discourse impeachment. He's being thrown out, and the senator from Naboo, Senator Sheev Palpatine, is nominating himself because, after all, it is his planet that is under attack. So he feels like if he could go and represent his planet, then you know, then the Republic could fight back. So Queen Amidala declares a vote. She's the last vote. So if she votes a vote of no confidence, Chancellor Valorum will be thrown out. So she does that, and there's a new chancellor elected in Sheev Palpatine. So going forward, Sheev Palpatine will be the new chancellor of the Galactic Republic. But what else is going on? Qui-Gon Jinn goes to the Jedi Temple. He meets with the Jedi Council, which includes Yoda, which includes Mace Windu. Who's Mace Windu? Mace Windu is played by Samuel L. Jackson. While Yoda is the most wisest of the Jedis, Mace Windu is the strongest of the Jedis. And they declare, the Jedis do, that not only that they found the divergence in the Force, they've discovered this boy on Tatooine, but while they were on Tatooine, they were attacked by a Sith. The Sith are the Force users that manipulate the Force for evil. They're the dark side Force users. And according to the history, they've been exiled from the galaxy for 1,000 years. So the Jedi Council doesn't believe really that they exist, but they sense it too. They sense an imbalance in the Force, which means that evil has arisen up. They don't know where the evil is or where it's coming from, but evil has arisen up, and the Sith is back after 1,000 years of exile. These dark Jedi users are actually back, and who attacks them is Darth Maul. Darth Maul is the apprentice of this evil Jedi. I mean, this evil Sith master. The Council doesn't know who the master is, but they know who the apprentice is because Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan were attacked on Tatooine by the apprentice. But Yoda says there's always two. There's always a master and there's always an apprentice. So there has to be a master. If there's an apprentice, there has to be a master, but they don't know who the master is. So, and then he tells him about the boy. The boy does his trials. They do his test. The Jedi Council, both all the Jedi Council members, but most vocal are Mace Windu and Yoda. They decline to train him because number one, he's too old. Usually, the way it's done is they will get a baby. They will get a small infant baby and take him from his family and train him as a Jedi when he's a baby, when he or she is a baby. Why? Because they don't want the child to have any attachments. Because if the child has attachments, those attachments can be used to manipulate the person to go to the dark side. Remember in episode 6 in Return of the Jedi, Obi-Wan says to Luke, your feelings serve you well, but they can be manipulated to serve the Emperor. In other words, if you care about somebody, you're willing to go above and beyond, even do evil things in order to save that person's life or to make that person's life better, even to subvert the good. And Jedis have to be selfless. So therefore, Jedis can have no attachments. They can't have attachments to parents. They can't have relationships. They can't have family. They can't really even have friendships because those attachments, those that care for people, can be used to turn a person evil. It can be manipulated because say somebody says to you, oh, well, if you don't do this, the person you love will die. Then you'll go out of your way and you'll do the evil thing. You go out of character just to not have that person die, for fear of losing them. So Jedis, they recruit when the person is a baby. You can't be old 6, 7, right? Or like whatever age Anakin is around that age. So the Jedi Council declines. They will not train Anakin Skywalker in the ways of the Force because of his age and because he has a lot of fear. He's scared of being alone. He's afraid because he's never been out on his own. And Yoda says, fear is the path to the dark side. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering. But Qui-Gon, he's determined. Sometimes he defies the Jedi Council. So he tells Obi-Wan in private, his Padawan, he says, I have nothing left to teach you. I've taught you everything you know. You are ready to become not just a Padawan, not just a student, but you are ready to become a Jedi in your own right. And now I will take on Anakin as my Padawan. Of course, Obi-Wan is concerned because the council just said that Anakin is too old, that he has a lot of fear in him, and his fear can be exploited by the dark side of the Force. But Qui-Gon's going to do it anyway. So after that, they're ambushed by Darth Maul, the apprentice, and both of them, Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan, fight Darth Maul. And this is one of the best scenes in the entire movie because this is the Duel of the Fates. John Williams, the composer of all the Star Wars movies, does his thing in there. Duel of the Fates is one of the best pieces in the entire film besides the opening and the Force theme. Darth Maul has a two-headed lightsaber. He kind of looks like the regular Christian image of the devil that we know. Right? So he's fighting both of them, and he stabs Qui-Gon Jinn, and Qui-Gon Jinn dies. So Obi-Wan, in a fit of rage, kills Darth Maul, and Darth Maul is split in half. While this is going on, uh, they tell Anakin to stay put, but does he listen? No. He rides one of the ships uh, that's in the hangar bay, and he goes and this young 7-year old kid, dest- destroys the trade, destroys and blows up the Trade Federation ship. So Anakin saves the day by blowing up the Trade Federation ship and basically saving Naboo. Now, what are some of the other revelations that we get while they're in Coruscant? We find out that the young girl, played by Natalie Portman, that's been following them around, is not the handmaiden of Queen Amidala, but is actually Queen Amidala herself, disguised, disguised as her own handmaiden. She didn't trust anybody else to get this intel. She felt like she had to do it herself. She's very hands on for a teenage queen. And this ties in with the theme of the other Star Wars movies, where um, at first we don't know that Obi-Wan Kenobi, that Ben Kenobi is Obi-Wan Kenobi. We don't know who Yoda is. Yoda disguises himself. Obi-Wan Kenobi disguises himself. Well, likewise, Queen Amidala disguises herself. She disguises herself as her own handmaiden. But now Naboo has been invaded, and they don't have an army, Naboo, but the Gungans do. So the Gungans and the people of Naboo finally form an alliance, and Jar Jar Binks is the general. And Jar Jar Binks leads the good guys into battle, and they destroy the Federation droids. So the Federation trade ship is destroyed. The Federation's droids are destroyed, and the good guys win. And for now, the Trade Federation is weakened, and Sheev Palpatine is now the the chancellor of the whole Galactic Republic, and Naboo is saved. And of course, Anakin is awarded a medal, and Qui-Gon, and then they have Qui-Gon's funeral, where Yoda tells Obi-Wan that they still have to look for the master. They found the apprentice, they killed the apprentice, but the master is still there. And speaking of masters, after Qui-Gon's funeral, Obi-Wan made a promise to dying Qui-Gon. As Qui-Gon was dying in his arms, Obi-Wan said, "Promise me that you will train Anakin when I'm gone." So that's what he does, and Anakin officially becomes a Jedi. Now, during their journey, Anakin kind of fell in love with Padme, the girl who he thought was the handmaiden, but was actually Queen Amidala herself. Now, this is very problematic considering the fact that Anakin Skywalker is like 7 or 8 years old, and Padme is like 14. But George Lucas, just like he overlooked the incest with Luke and Leia, he kind of overlooks this as well, and we start to see a budding romance between, which is originally just like a friendship. They're like just friends at first. We don't really start to see hints of a romance until the next movie. But obviously, Anakin is attracted to her. He kind of has a crush on her, you could say. And now he gets his braid. He's off to become Obi-Wan Kenobi's Padawan. And that's where we leave off. This movie was a massive success when it first came out. Like I said, Pepsi launched a thing where each character was represented. You know, you had Watto, you had Darth Maul, you had the Emperor, you had the Nemoidians, all these characters that we were now introduced to, Jar Jar Binks. And it made a lot of money. But the thing was, people hadn't seen a Star Wars movie in theaters since 1983, so they had high expectations, too high. And when they saw it, they wanted to like it. But after a while, it was like kind of like people are experiencing now with Snow White. They want to like this new version of Snow White starring Rachel Zegler, but it sucks. You know what I mean? Like, it's like I said with WrestleMania 27. I wanted to like it. I thought I would, but after a while, you watch it and it kind of leaves a bad taste in your mouth. You're like, damn, I really want to like this. This is Star Wars. You know, I'm the first time Star Wars is on the big screen since the early 1980s. But you know, it's not so good. It's kind of boring, right? Too much talk of politics. Too much talk of the metaphysical. Um, too much exposition about the Force. We don't really like this whole concept of midichlorians. And this fucking Jar Jar Binks character is annoying and childish and juvenile and kind of racist because remember what I said that George Lucas watched all these 1930s and 1940s movies and he drew inspiration from them. You know, all World War II movies, a lot of World War II movies, you know, fighting in the Pacific, fighting in Europe for World War II. But some of the movies that he watched were like step and fetching movies where black characters were depicted as really buffoonish. So he took from that, and that's how he created the character of Jar Jar. The way that Jar Jar speaks is very patois-like, very inspired by like Caribbean, Black Caribbean dialect, for example. And people took offense to it. And the character was so stupid and buffoonish that he became the focal point of the fans' vitriol. It's kind of like what I said about wrestling fans, where John Cena became the focal point of everything they hated about the new WWE once it went PG. Well, this was the same way. These Star Wars fans that were fans of the original trilogy, they lashed out, and Jar Jar became Jar Jar was their John Cena. Jar Jar to them was a representation of the franchise going corporate, selling out, becoming too kid like, becoming too kid friendly. And basically, the way that Lucas responded to the criticism was one with the racist criticism, mostly coming from Michael Eric Dyson. He said, you know, that's ridiculous. You know what I mean? The character is not a representation of black people at all. You know, this is just, you know, how he speaks. This is Gungan language. All the Gungans, including Boss Naz, the chief Gungan, speak this way. And in regards to the accusations about Jar Jar being too childish and buffoonish, basically he wins the war between the Gungans and the droids by accident. In response to that, he says, you know, what do you expect? Star Wars is a movie for 8-year-old boys. It's not a movie for grown adults. It's a child's movie. So, you know, what do you expect? Of course, the character of Jar Jar Binks is going to be childish. And you know the actor who played young Anakin Skywalker, Jake Lloyd, he becomes he receives a lot of vitriol. In his school, he is made fun of. His life is made a living hell. The character that plays Jar Jar Binks in the suit is Ahmed Best. He becomes a target of the online vitriol. Keep in mind, the internet was just basically coming out. People were just now basically having a voice for the first time ever. You know, they didn't like the Ewoks, but in Return of the Jedi, but they couldn't really lash out about the Ewoks because in 1983 there was no internet. They could just voice their opinion and say, "Oh, the Ewoks suck. It's too childish," right? And they don't want to watch it. But now they're becoming more and more vitriolic with the internet, and they basically make this guy Ahmed Best life a living hell. The guy almost commits suicide. Same with Jake Lloyd. Jake Lloyd eventually gets into legal trouble because the way that the fans react, the toxic nature of the fan base. I mean, they just could not accept that the old generation could just not accept that Star Wars was going to be different. Star Wars is made for children. That a new generation, like my generation, was going to experience Star Wars in a different way than they experienced. They just could not accept that. And it became a battle of fandoms of the generations. The older generation with their version of Star Wars, and the newer generation represented with their version of Star Wars. But George Lucas said, "Fuck it." The movie made a lot of money, and we move on to 2002, the second chapter in the prequel trilogy, which I consider even me as a prequels fan, I consider the Attack of the Clones, the next one, the worst of the trilogy. Part of the reason why I think a lot of people didn't like the Phantom Menace was because when they envisioned a young tales of a young Anakin Skywalker, they did not envision tales of him that young. You know what I mean? While he was too old for the in story, he was too old for the council to train. He was too young for the fans to accept. They envisioned maybe a teenage Anakin Skywalker, maybe an older Obi-Wan Kenobi, which we get in the next movie. But uh, they did not envision a kid Anakin Skywalker. You know what I mean? But the reason why George Lucas made it this way was because he felt that he could better reflect the innocence of a person when they're that young, and how he wanted to explore how a good person becomes bad. So you make them the most innocent that you can make them. You can't make them a baby, so you make him a really small young child to show him at his most innocent stage, which to me makes a lot of sense. You know, but uh, in the next one, he will be a teenager. So we move on to Attack of the Clones, episode 2. And this was George Lucas's return to directing. He hadn't directed a Star Wars film himself since the first one in 1977. Um, Irving Kushner directed Empire Strikes Back, one of the best, of course, the best one. And Richard Marquand, Ralph McQuarrie did the drawings. Richard Marquand directed uh, Return of the Jedi. But here, Lucas is hands on. He approached Ron Howard, he approached Steven Spielberg with possibly directing it. Both declined. Spielberg never directed a Star Wars movie, which would have been interesting if he did. Ron Howard eventually did with the worst Star Wars movie, the only Star Wars movie to ever lose money. When we get to it, we'll talk about it in 2018. It was not part of the main series. It was one of their side projects later on. But yeah, this movie made a lot of money, but was really panned by critics. So we move on to the next one, Attack of the Clones, which is set like 10 years after this one. Peace, guys. Thank you, David and Lisa, for contributing. David says he watched this one a lot. David, he grew up in my generation, kind of my generation. I'm a little bit older than he is. He was born like in the early 80s. I mean, in the late 80s, rather, I think. So he grew up with these just like I did. This one is my Star Wars. I'm too old for the newer ones, and I'm too young for the older older ones. Since the middle one is my Star Wars, the one I grew up going to the movies to see. So we'll talk about it next. 2002 is Attack of the Clones. Peace.